Press the right thing. Welcome back to the PT Graduate
Gotta go.
Podcast.
Okay, descent. Yep.
Yeah, good to go. Welcome back to the PT Graduate Podcast. My guest today, Bronwyn Adams-Hooper. Hi, Bronny.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. And great to see you, and thank you for your time today. It's always much appreciated that people give up their time to come and share a little bit about themselves and give that to the world. So much appreciated. So this is the PT Graduate Podcast, and you have you've operated in the health and fitness world for a number of years prior to what you do today. So perhaps we start there and work our way forwards, because I don't really know much about what you did prior to that. So it'd be interesting to find out why you got into the exercise industry and then that journey beyond.
Okay. So I got into the exercise industry, and I can remember exactly when. I was flying back from Mexico. My husband and I travel a lot. For like, this is actually my second July in 25 years that I've actually spent in New Zealand. Every other one's been out of New Zealand. I don't do winter very well, so you might as well just go and adapt to the climate you like. And I remember flying back from Mexico, and I had been in a role previously which I'd stopped enjoying, and I was like to Mike, I need to do something new. And he's like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to become an exercise professional. I'm going to go and be a PT. And he looked at me and went, where did that come from? And I'm like, oh, I'm not really sure, but that will work. And we got off the plane, and I rang the New Zealand Institute of Sport, and they actually had a course starting on the Monday. So that was the Wednesday, and I started the course on the Monday.
Righty.
And I think the real reason that I was attracted to that is in my 20s, I'd been quite a big person. I think my top weight was around 125 kilos. And through changing my life, end of my 20s, traveling, and just really starting to enjoy life again, I'd lost over 50 kilos, and everybody used to ask me how to do it. And I'd like go, I'll just go traveling. And that worked for me. That's all I did. I just went and walked around the world for 2 years and came back a completely different person. But I kind of clicked that wasn't really the advice people were looking for. And I know it would work for everybody if they tried it. Not many people were going to go and take 2 years of their life out and just go and reinvent themselves. So I sort of was really interested in why it had worked for me and how it could work for other people. So that was my kind of link in. And then when I got in, I just dived in.
So what year would that have been when you started?
What year would that have been? Oh my gosh. It would be 20 years ago, 19 years ago. Be about 19 years ago. So okay. Yeah.
And then 2012, Personal Trainer of the Year.
Yeah.
Congrats.
I was really kind of gobsmacked about that. I didn't see it coming. But I was just doing what I did because I was very different. I right from day one, I started my own studio. So I didn't know what other personal trainers looked like or were doing in big box gyms. I was just doing my own stuff. And I was lucky enough to link very early on to some other trainers in the industry who saw the world in a very different way, like I did, like Ian O'Dwyer and Dave Leo and that. And so I just, and then I just kind of traveled around the world just learning and doing really cool stuff.
Smart. And obviously that got results, because I remember reading the judges' comments from that year, those awards, and they talked about your clients' results are your results. So if they're successful, you're successful, and clearly that was one of the reasons that you won.
I mean, I did, my clients just did do amazingly well. Just to blow my brains, actually, that they could integrate the knowledge I was giving them so well and make the changes that were needed to especially because I sort of worked mainly with obese people. So like,
Right.
you know, and that
Yeah.
was where, you know, I did have, you know, group classes and all the rest, but you know, the majority of my time was, you know, helping people make those really big leaps, what you have to make if you want to change your body shape.
Yeah. It's hard work, isn't it? There's some significant emotional and time investment in doing that.
Yeah, totally.
Massive.
Especially the emotional. There's a reason why you're big. There's always a benefit to you of being big. And until you can see that and then realize you can get that same benefit in a smaller body, you're not going to change.
Yeah.
And getting that concept sometimes is pretty hard because people go, oh, I hate it. I don't want to be like this. And it's like, well, you like this for a reason. You've got to find that reason and actually understand it. And, you know, for me personally, I found that reason and understood it. And, and then could see how stupid it was.
And it's providing a safe space for people to go through that process, isn't it? And have that introspection so that they can identify it for themselves as part of that journey. And if you've been through it yourself, you know what's involved. And it's just it just takes time for the penny to drop. But when they find it, hey presto, they're away. Yeah.
And I mean, the easiest part is actually losing the weight. The hardest part is keeping it off. And everything will tell you that. And that's where those big shifts have to occur. And I mean, for myself, it took 5 years for my metabolism to actually start working normally. You know, in those first 5 years after I'd lose that amount of weight, you know, if I looked at a bit of food, I'd put on 3 kilos and my husband would be overeating and he'd go, don't know why you do. And I'd like, I don't know why either, you know. Yeah. And it was just before my body could learn how to trust me again. I had to have so many things in place to ensure that, you know, long term, it all just kept working nicely. Yeah.
You're right. It is a process. The weight coming off is only just a step of it, isn't it? The metabolism catch up is a whole nother step in itself.
And the mental catch up, you know, for, you know, again, for myself, and I've spoken to many women about this, they didn't feel actually any different. They still felt big. And why you're still like that, it's a very hard place to stay slimmer. I still remember walking, you know, down the street with my husband and realizing I fitted in the shadow. Like we're walking down, someone's behind us and we were looking and I was like, oh, my shadow's smaller than his. And I couldn't get my head around how that could happen because, you know, I used to do his head in when we were traveling. I'd go, am I bigger or smaller than that person over there? Because I couldn't tell. That whole dysmorphia, which is really, really normal and people don't talk about, was very much part of my reality. And he'd look at me and go, of course you're not as big as that person. Why would you even think that? And I'm like, well, because I feel bigger than they do. And even when I used to swim when I was really big and then I stopped and then I went back swimming and my coach couldn't work out why I was swimming the way I was. I was swimming around somebody who was a lot larger because my muscle memory was to go around all this body and all this body wasn't there.
Yes. Your technique would be different. And
it was really hard to learn to bring my arms where my body now is instead of where my body used to be, because I'd swum as a big person, you know, for 8 or 9 years. I was very active as a big person, very strong as a big person. And then to jump in a pool and go, oh, firstly, I sunk. And I hadn't sunk in a long time. I never used to have to kick, you know, I was really lazy because, you know, legs stayed so far out of the water anyway. All those little things you don't think about. And when that transition happens, you know, unless you can sort of bring attention to them for the client, sometimes they think they're weird because they just,
So you want to try and normalize that stuff for them as much as possible, so they feel like it's
prepare them for it. That they might feel like this, and this will be normal to feel like this, or your sense of normal, and that's okay. And give yourself time, and your brain will catch up with what the changes in the body has happened as well. It does take time. And don't go diving after you've lost a lot of weight and not sort of tell the dive instructor. They put like the old weight belt on. I still remember getting to the bottom in 2 seconds going, oh, maybe I need to take my weight belt off down here and take a few of the weights off because I'm never going to get back up.
Miscalculation.
Yeah.
Classic. I suppose.
And you don't talk about these sorts of things.
No, you don't. And I suppose, like, I'm familiar with that dysmorphia of the brain catching up slower than the body because the weight comes off quite quickly. And I never thought about it in a water context in terms of swimming and diving at all, ever.
No.
Makes total sense. Yeah.
And even walking, you'll see, somebody who's lost a little weight and they'll still be walking like a big person. And they're not.
Yes.
Yeah.
So their gait is still of the old pattern and it hasn't caught up. Yeah.
Yeah. And you see that a lot, especially now so many people are having surgery and it's coming off so fast. You see a lot of that where things haven't caught up. And I think that's really, really hard. Yeah.
Interesting. You introduced me to a concept which I hadn't come across before when I was in Christchurch a couple of years ago, and it's the multipotentialite. Is that the right word?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it made me immediately go and Google it, and I left a web browser page open on that for a long time because I kept going back, reading a little bit more, going, I like this concept, but not one that I'd ever been aware of before. But that's something that is true for you because you took a big shift from the exercise space into gardening and horticulture.
Yeah, so maybe we should explain what multipotentialite is.
Yes, let's do that.
And it's really hilarious because as a group of people, we can't actually agree on that. So that tells you a lot about multipotentialites to start off with. There's quite a few different names for multipotentialite as well. I just like that word. I play Scrabble, so it's such a good Scrabble word.
Yes.
I've never got it out, of course, but
Yeah, it's a long word.
It's a long word. So a multipotentialite is somebody who dives deep into whatever they're thinking about, whatever their passion is at that time, and then something switches and then they're over here diving deep into something else.
Right.
And it just keeps happening. And in a society where you're meant to have a career and you're meant to know what is going to fulfill you, we kind of sit outside that because that's not the traditional way you progress through life. Yet we have this ability to take everything we've learned in the past with us, and it's of the intersections of what we know about that subject and what we know about our new subject. We actually create something really, really amazing because not everybody can do that. So if you're stuck in, specialized into one thing, you don't have all these other things to draw around. So like my second ever business was actually at about 22. I started a hire yard, a mechanical hire yard.
Yeah.
And my husband's an engineer and he got really sick of fixing things. So very early on, he taught me how to build trailers, wire trailers, weld, all the rest, because he didn't want to spend all his weekends doing that work for me. He still did, but at least I helped him do it. And so I learned how to see straight, level and square, because as an engineer, that's something what you really need to be able to see. You measure, but you need to really be able to see if something's straight, level and square.
Yeah.
I took that as a personal trainer with me. So I could look at somebody's posture, see straight, level and square. So, when we're learning, PTing and they were talking about imbalances, like a lot of my classmates couldn't get that. Whereas I could see it without plumb lines. I've never used plumb lines in my gym because I don't need to, because as an engineer, you can see something, is straight, level or square. You can see if hips are out, you can see shoulders, you can.
Sure.
And so you have the ability as a multi-potentialite to take skills from the past with you into the new and find this like junction, and actually it expands everything.
Yeah. Right.
So I went from, PTing, coaching, loving it, and I jumped into a little rabbit hole and realized I had to dive into that, and I couldn't, like when I dive into a rabbit hole, I can't keep doing what I'm doing. I don't have this brain space or the time space because I go so deep. And my rabbit hole was I was getting more and more interested in the nutritional side of PTing, and I did like precision nutrition level 2 through Canada, and which is basically diploma level. And then I was like integrating this with clients, but I couldn't work out why some clients were responding really, really well to eating a lot of veggies and getting the results you would expect. And then other clients were eating the same amount of veggies, but they weren't getting the same results. So like, was one lying to me? And, and I was like, I actually don't think they are. And then I thought, because I was eating well, but I was also buying a lot of veggies, and they were going into that thing called a fridge where all veggies go to die. And I was feeling a wee bit hypocritical. So I was sort of reading that, if you grow your own, you're more likely to eat it. So I started a little veggie garden at my back door, so I'd see it, so I'd eat it on my way in. And I had this amazing experience where I picked a load of salad for lunch, ate it, and went, oh my gosh, I am so satisfied. And I'm like, and it kept happening. And I was like, I'm eating half the calories, but why am I feeling so satisfied? And then I'd like try it with, store-bought lettuce, and I wasn't getting that same result. And it kept playing in my head. And then that was it. I had to like stop PTing because I needed to go and work out why soil health affected plant health, which affected the nutritional content of that plant to such a degree that all plants are not equal.
Right. Gotcha.
Does that really make sense? So you can have a cabbage here and you can have a cabbage here, and they can look identical, but the bricks level of one growing in a unorganic, heavily sprayed, minerally deficient soil, and the bricks is the amount of sugar content which rises up through the plant, could be about 3 or 4. And I've tested cabbages in supermarkets because I'm that type of person. I take along my bricks measure, and I jump over into commercial people's places to see what their bricks levels are. And it's quite normal to have a bricks of about 3 or 4 in a cabbage. Well, at the moment my cabbages are sitting at about 16. And so that means the amount of mineral which is drawn up through into the part we're going to eat, and the carbohydrate in that part is significantly more. So all of a sudden I could understand why some people were getting the results, because they were sourcing their food, their greenery, in a different way to the people over here. And the difference that was having on life.
Wow. Amazing.
So you can see, and then it just led me down this path. So I went back to Lincoln University and did, a level 3 and 4 diploma in organics. At the same time, they told me that wasn't possible. I told them I didn't have 2 years to give, so I would actually manage to sit in on every class, and when I didn't, I'd catch up on every class and I would pass. Because one thing about multi-potentialites is we're good at rapid learning, and we've done it so often, we're very good at being beginners.
Yes.
We've never ever lost that. And for a lot of people, when they think about beginning again, there's a lot of fear. And for us, it's a lot of excitement.
Right, quite the opposite. It's a skill that's
just like because we've just got so many questions, and we dive in, and
it comes with the territory, so your brain is already in that mode.
Because we already want to dive deep, and we want to learn, and we want to and then we get to a stage where, oh god, that's boring.
Start again.
And we find out where we need to go next, and we dive again. And goes right back to when I was a child. I still remember as a child, it's normally about, 5, 6, everybody starts, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I always had this list of things I was going to do when I grow up. And I remember as a kid, that was okay. Everybody used to laugh at my list, but I was always going to be a farmer, and then I was going to be a doctor, and then I was going to be this. And they'd go, well, and then one day they would like, you have to choose. And I'm like, well, no one told me this was the rules in life. And it really, really threw me into not doing any of it because I couldn't choose. Because it was like, they'd go, you'll have to be doing this for the rest of your life. And every time I tried to picture that, I just like, I don't want to do any of it. So I missed out on quite a bit because of societal expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, it became a block as opposed to an open gate. Yeah.
And then I would, do something for a couple of years and I'd get really good at it. I've got a history of getting really good at it. I get embarrassed a wee bit saying this, but everything I've done, I've got to the top of. If I do a course, it's always like, I get to the top of it. And then, people go, oh, you wasted your time again, because I would just leave it and I'd go and do something else. And that's why, at such a young age, I started my own businesses, because then they were mine. Nobody could tell me that I was wasting my time.
You're in control.
Because then I had something I could sell.
Yeah, exactly.
Money, and everybody thinks you're doing well. But it was really a boredom thing, because I knew, I could get deep into a business, build it up in 5 years, flick it off, because that's all. And then I'd start the next thing.
Fair enough. Serial entrepreneur.
But
is it fair to say that not all entrepreneurs are multi-potentialites, or
exactly
doesn't always go?
No, it doesn't always go both ways, and there isn't a right or a wrong way. And I think some of the best collaborations I've ever had are with people who are specialists. So when I was PTing, I was working with a neuroscientist, a psychologist, and someone in the nutrition field, and we were doing like studies together. And I needed their speciality, and they needed my stupid brain's ability to go ping, ping, ping. Because I added something that they didn't have, and they definitely added something that, it worked both ways. And I think that sometimes is a really, really good relationship to start getting, and seeing those skills instead of so and sometimes I think, oh gosh, it must be really nice. I've got 2 male friends who I think of, and one's been in the same company, same job since he's 18, and he's amazingly happy, and he's progressed slowly through the company, and he's incredibly happy. And the other friend's the same, and I think, oh gosh, that must be really nice.
That just helps
but I
you.
find that incredibly boring.
Yeah, exactly. But that helps you understand the difference with people, right? We're all so different, and we all need different things.
And I think the other thing about being a multi-potentialite, which is really one of our skill sets, is we're highly adaptable.
Right.
So, we do adapt to change a lot better than what most people will, because that's part of what we do regularly. So again, we don't have that, that stuck feeling very often. I've got one rule in my life: if I wake up 3 days in a row not enjoying something, I will change it.
Okay, I like that. That's good.
You get 3 days.
That's not much.
And that can be right throughout my whole life. And my husband sometimes go, we're not up to day 3 yet, are we?
Get serious.
We never have long arguments in our house. He knows it's most probably good to hold a grudge for 2 days, not 3. But you know what I mean?
I do.
I meet a lot of people who will stay with something for years longer than it served them, because they can't see that it's okay to start again, to change, to leap out, because they're conditioned, and especially maybe more in men in careers and that monetary thing. They you know, they've put so much effort in and they've got so far up. The thought of jumping back down and everything is just too hard.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been lucky that I've never let that limit me. Like, I'm just starting a new career at the moment, and I'm very much the beginner.
Okay.
And I've got so much to learn. And it's an industry which is very low wage to start off with.
Yeah.
But I didn't let that influence my decision of where I wanted to chase my passions. Like, yeah. But I do understand for a lot of people that's very hard to, and sometimes I meet people who you just know straight up they're multi-potentialites.
Right.
And the reason they are just so unhappy at the moment is because they can't see a way to follow what their brain wants to follow.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And they might go so far up that they can and their outside passions, but that's never enough.
Yeah, they're locked in. And I think that sort of plays to that whole growth mindset versus fixed mindset, doesn't it? That, I think it's Einstein that said, a sign of intelligence is adaptability, or something along those lines. And those who can adapt are the survivors, and those who can't are not. And certainly testing times with COVID and other larger factors in life, we had to adapt. We had to roll with the changes, otherwise we weren't going to be able to keep doing what we were doing. So I think if that's in your DNA already, it does make life less of a problem when those challenges occur.
Yeah. And again, I was here in the earthquakes when so many people didn't adapt well. And I found it really insightful to watching the people who could adapt well and who couldn't, who just went with, this is just the new reality, and those who just wanted to hold on to the way things were. And the same with COVID. But you're right, having that adaptability is key. And it is so much easier when you're used to being a beginner. And so often that's so uncomfortable being a beginner. I'm back there after 6 or 7 years, the last 3 being kind of really right up the top of where I was, and doing mentorships and teaching people about nutrition and gardening and organics and all that. And now to jump back, it's like, oh gosh, I've forgotten how uncomfortable this can feel sometimes. How annoying that you just don't get something right straight up. And it's like, no, I need the skills.
Start the learning process again. So that took you into the gardening, and let's just go straight into it and say Gardener of the Year 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Interesting. When I wrote those down, I had PT of the Year 2012, Gardener of the Year 2021. It's just the digits are reversed.
And if you go back about 10 years before that, you'll find something else in my history as well. But it was an industry where I got
another one.
Yeah.
I could only find
way before the internet, so not everything's on there.
Could be. That's all I could find. But obviously that's the path that it took you down in terms of that horticulture, understanding the nutritional impact of the soil quality and a whole bunch of other things, and you have put that to good effect with helping the prisons. So you ran a program with the Christchurch Men's Prison, and ran a program for the inmates so that they could grow their own, and then were able to enter awards with them.
And again, I took everything I knew beforehand. So I was working with 17 to 19-year-old males, which is a 55-year-old female. What was my relevance? Most of them were of Māori or Pacific descent. I was white. What was my relevance? But I could take all those things, so from the personal training aspect, I could put that into the garden. So if we sometimes you get out there and they would just be edgy. They'd been in their cells, sometimes 22, 23 hours a day. And, you've got all that youth and all that and they just want to like do something, so we would start with press ups, with sprints, with even though we're doing gardens, I need to get all that out. So all those skills, and if they swore at me, it was 20 press ups, mate, that's just not appropriate. And there was all this other, I could teach them how to shovel well, so they didn't hurt themselves. All those biomechanical things which I learned as a PT, I could take through to the garden, and from there we could build on that and help them with their nutrition, what they could control. And again, all those coaching skills that I'd learned, because there's so much in prison you cannot control. But what can you control? Because there is things you are in control of. And teaching them to be able to see the differences. So then they knew, hey, actually, I can control this. This is in my control. It's not in their control. They can order me around. They can have the structure. They can, take away my privileges just because they can. They can do all these things. But my responses and how I look at things are in my control. And you're just getting wee things changed, like all the lights, so they were always on, so they never got deep sleep. So they're always in that flight or fight response, and talking to the prison guards, hey, can we just make a few changes around this and this, and which can improve their health, getting them on vitamin D, demanding that they get vitamin D tests when they went to the doctor, because there was no way they could. So of course their brains weren't functioning well. All these little things. And it wasn't just because I'd learned organics. It was that whole, and I couldn't have done what I did or got New Zealand Gardener of the Year if I hadn't been personal trainer.
Really? Okay. That's strong a link. Okay.
Yeah. There totally is, because all those coaching skills are actually what made me Gardener of the Year. It wasn't all the gardening skills.
Right.
They came into play. But it was actually those interpersonal coaching skills. So I could actually get them to start believing in themselves, because that's what PTs do. We get people to start believing in themselves. They
won awards. They won what, 16 certificates, I think I found.
Like we used to like they're just in the local AMP shows and things, but I would grow all the veggies, and they'd have to choose the veggies they wanted to put in the shows, and then I would come in on the Friday night and collect them all, and then take them and set them up at the show, so because they could never do that. But and also flowers, so we planted big rose gardens, and it's nothing better than an 18-year-old guy stuck in prison beating an old lady out in Sheffield in the rose at the local show. And I think if there's there's two memories around that, and I really do wish everybody had been there to share those with me. And one was choosing the most fragrant rose out of the garden to enter into a show. Seeing, I normally had about 8 to 10 boys at a time, and watching 8 to 10 young men who were in medium security, which basically means they'd done something really nasty at that age. So we're not talking, they'd done, very big crimes, as rape or deaths or, things like that. So we weren't talking about, but watching them sit there and smell a rose and then smell another rose and decide which was the most fragrant rose, and seeing the gentleness with which they did this, I think would help everybody if we could see them in that light. Because we see them as just bad, like that, boom. But no, like and for me personally, after a while I realized that if I'd lived their lives with their upbringing, I would most probably made many of the same choices they made. I know better than them. All I've had is better life experiences. And then the other thing around the roses was really cool when I taught them, because they've all got the toilets in their room, which are quite foul and smelly, and because they only get given stuff to clean them so many times a week, and there's, because they're chemicals, so they can't have them in there all the time. There's all these basic things you don't think about, but you do have rose petals. So every toilet in the youth unit, one stage, had rose petals floating on the top because they could flush them,
Yeah.
and the smell.
Yeah. Clever.
Small things.
Yeah.
But just imagine if your environment stops thinking, because every time you walk out of your room, you knew you could go and get a rose and just chuck it back in your toilet.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah. It's not going to be, it's not an offensive weapon. It's,
No.
It can't
But
kill
again,
you.
it makes the person feel better in that room. And guess what? If they feel better, they're likely to come out of the room not so aggressive. They're likely to actually interact with someone better.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Just adds to the vitamin D, the lighting, all those other little things, like you say.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was doing one of the projects, because the garden got too small, as gardens always will get too small, because you get, your garden up and then you're like, oh, I need to plant this. So the garden got too small. So we were like, okay, we need to do a little project and we need to do it really well. And then we need to take it to the top management. We need to skip all these layers. We're just going to take it right to the top and see if we can get them to let us extend the garden by 3. So I said, well, I reckon I've got some ways to do it. And again, came back to all my stuff I'd learned before I became a gardener.
Yeah.
And that was, we went all the way around the unit and we would sit and we would decide individually how we felt and then how the group energy felt. So we'd sit on concrete and close our eyes and we'd sit there for a while and would breathe and would think how we felt, and then would like go up against the wire and would sit there with the wire on our backs and breathe and see how we felt. And we were writing it all down, what emotions were coming up when we're in certain places and all the way around, and then would like go out onto the pitch and lie on the grass with all the sun on us, and how did we feel there. We went and hid in the corn, just about to cause emergency because they didn't know where everybody had gone. I forget the wee things. And how did we feel when we're like really immersed with all the corn and the sunflowers, because we grew them together all the way around us. And we did up this big project to get our garden extended, not on what we wanted the garden extended, but how our behavior would change if we had more time out in the garden.
Yes.
And we got it just like that. Nobody could believe I got it passed.
Really?
We did one presentation. She said, yep, you've got it.
Wow.
The boys did the presentation. They had to explain the differences. They knew how they felt. And it was so insightful about how they felt when they were like on concrete compared to grass. And for some of these boys, they'd been brought up in a concrete jungle. They'd been brought up in the city. They'd never spent time outside. And they were amazed when they just sat there, what thoughts came to their head. Did they feel less angry? Did they feel less tense? All those things that we know.
Yeah, that's right. Of course, it's the whole forest bathing thing, isn't it? The cortisol comes down. We go out of fight or flight. The positivity comes in. Wow, that's amazing. And so that managed. So that gave you permission to extend there.
Yeah.
And that worked. Would that have been something that could have been rolled out to other prisons? And
see, that's the thing. It would have been, but COVID came along.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and COVID kind of broke it for me. It was not a nice place to be. Like, for the average New Zealander, they were like, oh, we were locked up for so many weeks. I'm like, no, you weren't. You have no idea. Prisons were locked up. Like they were in prison 23 out of 24 hours a day in their cells by themselves, if they were lucky. If they were double bunked, they would be in prison with somebody else for 23 out of 24 hours a day, double bunked. I mean, come on, I couldn't be 24 hours a day with my husband in the same 3 by 4 meter room. And then, they stopped all volunteers. Then they let me in because I did have a really high trust model with them. But then, the boys, the turnover in the unit was really fast. So, I always had some who knew me. So some would actually be able to tell the others, hey, you don't want to stuff with this woman, actually. She will steal caps for a reason. But, I had that whole, mana with them. But then, you go 4 months and you haven't got anybody, you're starting again and you've got to build all that. And it just broke. And still not fixed in there. They're still, it's So that's when, and that was actually the hardest thing I've ever walked away from, because I wasn't ready to walk away.
Yeah.
But I also knew for my own personal being, I had to walk away because they were just, the management was just putting so much on me. It was unrealistic. They wouldn't let me bring in someone to help me, because again of COVID, all these things, and it was just, And then the garden got behind, and when that happens, the garden's not fun any longer.
You're always playing
So
catch up.
you're just going there and working hard with them, and that wasn't what it was about. When we had a good group and it was working really well, there was a lot of fun. There was work in the garden, but there was a lot of fun as well. And a lot of skill teaching, and that just, and I just couldn't see a way back in. So
it's an amazing story. I mean, obviously COVID put a dampener on things, but just the potential for improvement in those environments and for the well-being of the inmates is just massive, isn't it?
Yeah, it is incredible. And I was so naive when I started there. I thought New Zealand prisons were about rehabilitation, and that's why we put people in prison. No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not. There's none. And when I hear people go, "Oh, we need to be harder on them," I'm like, "Oh yeah, good luck. Let's see how that works."
We're already hard on them.
They don't understand empathy, and if you don't show it to them, they're never going to learn it.
No. So I also read that the skills they picked up helped some of them get some jobs. Is that right?
Yeah. So even Brilliant. Last year, one of the young boys, and I had been out for like 3 years, he messaged me. Again, that was one of the best things about stopping. While I was in there, I wasn't allowed to talk to any of them as they came out, which I always thought was really wrong, because you've got transference. So that, the transference in the system between the officers and everything was really supportive. And then they left, they were just by themselves again. And I just thought, as a coaching model, that's shit. That's not going to work. But of course, when I left, I could keep in touch with them. And like, I'm not saying that all people I'd want to keep in touch with, but those who I knew had the potential, I definitely did. And one of the young boys, he messaged me, and he'd just had a baby, and he'd shifted down to Invercargill, so his whole environment was different. And he's showing me his backyard, and he goes, "I want a veggie garden." So we organized to get him, some tools and some seeds down there, and he's locked into a really good job, and really and it did. It was that stepping stone for some of them. It was all they needed just to make those changes. Just that wee bit of belief in themselves that they could do it, and they were good at something. They'd won prizes for stuff they had done. They beat me sometimes, and that was like even better. I had to used to enter as well. I always won the total prize, but some things are not. Don't know how many years I kept that up for, but I'm highly competitive. And if they got the better cabbage than I did, they were just like, wow.
I bet they loved that.
They did. They did. But for some of them, they'd never received, not anywhere, not even at primary school had they got a award for anything. So to get an actual certificate was huge.
Massive. Mm-hmm. So, do you want to tell us? Are you happy to share what it is, the next stage,
the next stage
thing, or is it too early?
No, it's not too early at all. So, how do I introduce this one? So, about 2 years ago, a young friend of mine was getting married, and on a very tight budget. She was a German girl, but she was getting married in New Zealand with her fiance, and she was asking, we're part of the same gardening group, and she was asking some of the ladies, "Could you do the flowers for me?" And these ladies, had years of experience of, arranging flowers and doing flowers. And I had always prided myself on, other than having beneficial flowers in my garden, I had veggies. I was a veggie person. And everybody kept turning it down. And I was like, oh, that's so, they were scared. They didn't think, as a wedding, flowers are meant to look perfect and this and this. And this girl actually just wanted flowers because that was what her budget was going to allow. Wasn't going to allow, for perfection. And she was realistic. And so after a while, I went, "I'll do all your bouquets for you."
All right.
I hadn't made a bouquet in years. Like, in my 20s, I'd picked a few flowers around the house, with my mum and stuff, but, I had no idea. So I just jumped onto YouTube, and for about the 6 or 7 weeks I'd promised her before her wedding, I'd like sit there and follow her YouTube and some flowers, and I put them together and I'd send her through a photo, anything like this, and we're slowly getting an idea of what she liked and all the rest. And I did her flowers for her, and it was really fun. Yeah. And then I was like, you think putting flowers together would be really simple. They should just sit there, you put one there and one there, but it's like everything. It's actually a real skill. And, there's rules around design you have to know, and, all these other things that you don't think about when you get a beautiful bunch of flowers. They're just beautiful, and you think that was 2 seconds work for somebody. But no, it's another skill. And then, of course, me being me, it was like, I don't know enough about this. Oh, my gosh. So, all of a sudden I was like, and last year I found myself mentally not in a good space. I went overseas and did this huge walk through the top of Albania. It was like 200 and something Ks, and there was 1,000 meters climbing each day, and it was amazing. Came home and just that big dip, and I was just like, oh, we're up to day 3. And I was no longer motivated in my garden, and it was just like, no, okay, time over. And it was like, it's like a wee bit of a grief thing, but then it's like, okay, so what's next? And I thought, well, where am I spending my time? What am I doing? And I was like, oh, I'm picking flowers all the time, aren't I? So I thought, okay, I'll become a florist. And when I went back to school, because I did just finish a 6-month course back at school, learning how to become a florist, and people would go to me, oh, what are you going to do with it? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. I'm either going to fly all the way around the world and enter florist competitions.
You're a great way to travel.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, I suppose you would, wouldn't you? Because I want to be the best florist I can be. Yeah. And that's just, I've driven a tutor nuts for the last 6 months, where the rest of the class was sitting here, and she was like, and I'm like, ah! And she's like, I don't know. I'm like, because I need more. Yeah. So again, all those skills will come into play. All those business skills I learned as a PT will now come in setting up the floristry. All those, like I did some work experience in a florist, and I found myself helping people set up their workstations and saying, well, actually maybe you shouldn't actually hold your bouquets that way. No wonder all your shoulders are stuffed. I know it's that way. But if you just rotate in your hand,
not the shoulder.
I like it. You might have a back problem because you've been standing on concrete. I wonder if your boss can get you. See what I mean?
All
those intersections
dovetails together, and the soil thing from an eating point of view, from a growing point of view, there would be some similarity, some crossover there in terms of the
And one of the reasons I just about didn't jump down this rabbit hole is the environmental impacts flowers have. So we see in a florist, we see these beautiful, perfect flowers and go, yay. But so many of them are imported. Something I had to teach my class. I taught my class a lot about environmental stuff, because when you get something sprayed on a fruit or veggie, you have a withholding period. Okay, so there's a withholding period for that fruit or veggie to metabolize that spray apparently out through it. Cool. Now, with flowers, those withholding periods aren't there because we're not eating them. So you could have somebody, go through a glass house, spray in the morning, get the workers in there 2 hours later, once the spray's dried off, to cut all those flowers, get them put into plastic sleeves, so then they sweat that spray even more, and then they go to the florist, and florists actually have some of the highest rates of certain types of cancer, especially male florists around the world have very high testicle cancer rates compared to general populations. So, and then we put them in our houses. And then you have something called Oasis, which is a little green block, which has actually been banned from the Royal Horticultural Society in England and around Europe, but it's our mainstay in New Zealand to actually put flowers into. I wouldn't touch it. That was all in the class. I actually brought my own eco wool ones instead, and used other solutions for that problem, because it's a non-carcinogenic. So I know it does your head in, eh?
It does. Yeah.
You think you're buying something pretty and does anybody think about the environmental impact of flowers when they go and buy flowers? Of course not. No. So what I want to do, and there's not many in New Zealand doing it, is grow flowers to a certified organic standard, so people can come here and they can pick their own flowers. Right. So I can get people to actually make that connection back to the land, because I know how healthy that is for every individual person. And I understand that people are busy and they don't have flower gardens because it takes time, but they can come into mine and have a pick your own, and they know what they're picking is not going to be sprayed. So it's going to be just like veggies. Yeah.
Fantastic. Excellent. Oh, good stuff. Really exciting to hear the next project. Yeah. Really good.
And they bring joy. And I love bringing joy to people's lives. So, I think, And nice will I be doing it in 6 or 7 years? I doubt it.
No, there'll be something else.
Yeah. And if you ask me right now what it's going to be, I have no idea.
No, don't know yet.
It
will evolve.
Yeah. It should. Well, it should for me.
One of the things that I like to ask at the end of the podcast is tips from people, because lots of different people have had lots of different experiences, but some things have stood the test of time for them. And I think you'd be a great person to ask, because you've done so many different things, but there is a connection from one to the next, and there may be some sort of underlying themes. But obviously the audience here is sort of health and wellbeing professionals, but are there some things that have stood the test of time for you in terms of business or the way you do things, or it could be behavioral, whatever?
So I think authenticity and knowing that you're not just turning up. So if you feel like you're just turning up, change. Because business-wise, it's not going to work. Life-wise for yourself, it's not going to work. So keep curious and keep following your passions. And if that passion stays within the same stream, well done you. If it jumps you out into another river, don't be afraid to swim. You might swim upstream for a while, but you will actually manage to turn around and just go with it. The other thing too is know where your food comes from. Like, it doesn't matter how you eat or what way you choose to eat. As long as you know where that food comes from, I think you'll be way ahead. Okay. Because you can't know where your food comes from if it's coming out of packets. No. Okay. And there's so many little growers around New Zealand now that run little growing schemes where you can just get your veggies each week. They're all over the place. Lock into one of them, and then you'll know how it's growing. You'll get that connection back. I think that is really important.
No, I like that. How, if someone was quite new to that concept, how would someone find one of those?
If you went on, where would you go? I mean, even if you put up a little notice on your community board on Facebook, I'm sure you'd be amazed how many people would actually respond. And the other thing is, if if your feed isn't full of veggies and flowers and movement, you're most probably not doing it right.
I like it. The algorithm will find you.
Yes. Yeah. I'm always amazed when I look at other people's scrolls and I'm like, oh, how did you get that in front of you?
Excellent. That's brilliant. And if someone wanted a chat to pick your brains on something specific, what's the best way to find you, Bronny?
If they just go on Messenger. That's most probably the easiest way. I have got everywhere I've got without a business card, a website, or and I'm still
it's
running
worked so far.
Yeah, maybe for floristry, business cards would be kind of handy, but I'm still fighting it, and I'm presuming websites would be really handy as well, but I'm still fighting all that.
Good for you.
Yeah, because I think, again, if you're doing things well, people will find you.
Yeah.
And that word of mouth thing is so strong. I'm already, I'm only like 4 weeks out, and I'm already doing a lot of work for other people with floristry. And that is just word of mouth.
Yeah.
That is just completely and utterly word of mouth. Do one thing well and somebody will talk about it. Yeah, I think we get a bit caught up on all that website stuff to generate, and when we put the energy into our local community and making the connections where we need, we might need to do so much of that.
Yeah, I agree. That's really good advice.
That might be old school, but
yeah, it works. Yeah,
it does. Well, I find it does anyway. Yeah, maybe it's
fantastic.
Just my
That's fantastic. It's been really good chatting. I've really enjoyed.
Nice chatting to you too.
Yeah, it's been really good. So thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Okay.
Cheers. See ya.
Bye.